In 1940, simply riding a bicycle through a quiet street could decide who lived and who died. In a country where fear ruled and silence meant survival, danger didn't always come in uniforms or with weapons drawn. Sometimes, it looked like a teenage girl pedaling home. This is a story about how ordinary life became camouflage, and how innocence turned into the most effective disguise in a brutal occupation. Under Nazi control, the Netherlands became a place where being ignored was power, and movement itself became a form of resistance. How does a harmless object transform into a weapon without changing at all? And what does it cost a child to remain invisible long enough to survive a war? To understand how a bicycle became lethal and how a girl became a soldier, we need to go back to the moment when childhood ended and occupation began. In May 1940, the Netherlands collapsed into occupation as German planes filled the sky and resistance became a crime, punishable by death. Streets emptied, radios whispered propaganda, and fear shaped daily behavior. Curfews, ration cards, and informants turned neighbors into potential threats. In cities like Haarlem, where Freddie Oversteegen lived, silence became survival. Children learned early which questions not to ask and which opinions to hide. This was not a distant war front, but an intimate occupation that entered homes, schools, and families, forcing even teenagers to understand power, obedience, and danger long before adulthood arrived for everyone living there now. Freddie and her sister Truus were raised inside a household already opposed to fascism and injustice. Their mother, Freddie Oversteegen, was a committed communist who sheltered Jewish refugees, dissidents, and persecuted people even before the war began. Compassion was taught as obligation, not ideology. When the Germans invaded, political books were burned for safety, but beliefs remained intact. Later, Freddie recalled her mother permitting resistance work with one condition only: always stay human. That sentence became a moral boundary inside a world that demanded cruelty. It guided decisions made by frightened children under occupation daily during brutal wartime years there. The sisters began resistance work quietly, long before weapons entered their lives. They distributed illegal pamphlets, carried messages, and helped hide Jewish families from deportation. Freddie's age made her valuable. A teenage girl moving through the streets attracted little attention from soldiers trained to suspect men. These early missions taught discipline, observation, and silence. Riding bicycles, memorizing routes, and recognizing danger became routine. What looked like harmless errands were lessons in survival. Step by step, small acts of defiance trained Freddie for roles far more violent than anyone expected as the occupation hardened and resistance demands escalated rapidly everywhere around. Formal recruitment into armed resistance came through local commander Franz van der Wiel, who understood the power of invisibility. Freddie was petite, wore braided hair, and could easily pass for a younger child. To occupying forces, she seemed harmless. That misjudgment was strategic gold. Girls, especially teenagers, were rarely searched or questioned. What the Nazis overlooked became a weapon. Freddie's appearance functioned as camouflage, allowing her to cross checkpoints, carry materials, and later approach targets unnoticed. In this underground war, perception itself determined who lived, who moved freely, and who disappeared under constant threat, fear, and ruthless occupation daily everywhere. Most importantly, Freddie did not enter the resistance secretly or by accident. Her mother explicitly allowed it, knowing the risks and consequences. That permission ended childhood abruptly. The timeline is unforgiving. Invasion, recruitment, escalation, and moral compromise. Leaflets became sabotage. Sabotage became assassination. The bicycle followed this path as well, transforming from transport into tactical tool. Freddie did not seek violence, but violence demanded her participation. Invisibility became armor, and movement became survival. The question was no longer whether she could remain unseen, but how much that invisibility would ultimately cost her during the war's brutal, relentless years ahead alone. If this story pulled you into the shadows of occupied Holland, take a moment to support the channel. Like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because that innocent bicycle is about to reveal its true purpose. In the Netherlands, the bicycle was more than transportation. It was culture, necessity, and freedom. Cities were built for cycling, streets filled with riders moving quietly and efficiently. During occupation, fuel shortages made bicycles indispensable. 2 Nazi patrols, a cyclist blended into the background, part of the daily rhythm of civilian life. This normality was precisely what made the bicycle perfect for resistance. It required no fuel, made little noise, and raised no alarms. For Freddie Oversteegen, the bicycle was not adapted into a weapon physically. It was transformed tactically, turning routine movement into lethal opportunity without altering its innocent appearance at all. The Dutch resistance quickly understood that modern warfare was not only about firepower, but about misdirection. Freddie and Truus were taken to hidden locations, including underground sheds, where they learned to shoot pistols, handle weapons, and plan attacks. This training was abrupt and pragmatic. There were no uniforms, no ceremonies, only survival. Freddie later described learning to kill as something that simply became necessary. The bicycle fit seamlessly into this logic. It allowed quick approach, rapid execution, and immediate escape. In narrow streets and urban neighborhoods, it outperformed cars and avoided suspicion better than anyone on foot could manage. One of the most effective tactics, developed by the sisters, was what later became known as the bicycle drive-by. The method was brutally simple. Truus pedaled, maintaining balance and direction, while Freddie sat on the back, pistol hidden until the final moment. As they passed their target, often a Nazi officer or collaborator, Freddie fired at close range. The shots were sudden, precise, and devastating. Within seconds, they disappeared into ordinary traffic. Witnesses saw only 2 girls cycling away. The bicycle did not signal danger. It erased it. This method relied entirely on speed, surprise, and the invisibility of youth and femininity combined. Beyond the drive-by, the bicycle functioned as surveillance tool and escape mechanism. The sisters used it to follow targets discreetly, learning routines, addresses, and habits. Cycling behind someone did not attract attention. It allowed observation without confrontation. When danger appeared, the bicycle provided instant mobility. Unlike running, cycling looked purposeful. Unlike cars, it was silent. The resistance understood that every assassination required not only execution but escape. The bicycle ensured both. It was the difference between survival and capture. For Freddie, movement equaled safety. Standing still meant exposure. In this war, motion was life itself. Not all killings happened in the streets. Another major tactic involved luring targets into isolation. Freddie, Truus, and later Hannie Schaft would meet German soldiers or collaborators in cafes and bars. They flirted, talked, and appeared harmless. The bicycle often waited nearby, ready for departure. When a target agreed to a walk, they were led into forests or secluded areas. Their ambush followed. Sometimes another resistance member fired the fatal shot. Sometimes the sisters did. These operations combined psychological manipulation with physical violence, and bicycles ensured arrival and disappearance without trace or alarm afterward. Targets were not random. Many were Dutch collaborators who provided names of Jewish families to the Nazis. Others were high-ranking German officers. The sisters believed these killings prevented further arrests and deportations. Freddie later described them as grim necessities, not acts of hatred. She rarely spoke of numbers. When asked how many she killed, she responded, "One should not ask a soldier any of that." The bicycle enabled this selective violence. It allowed precise targeting without collateral damage. In crowded cities under occupation, that precision mattered. Resistance was not chaos. It was calculated disruption, hidden beneath normal life. Despite her actions, Freddie maintained moral boundaries. One proposed mission crossed a line even war could not justify. The resistance suggested kidnapping the children of a senior Nazi officer to exchange for captured fighters. If negotiations failed, the children would be killed. Freddie, Truus, and Hannie refused outright. "Resistance fighters don't murder children," Freddie said. This refusal reveals that the bicycle was not a symbol of indiscriminate violence. It was a tool used within chosen limits. Even while killing, Freddie clung to the promise made to her mother, to remain human in an inhuman war. The psychological toll of these missions was immense. Freddie described moments after shootings when instinct pushed her to help the wounded person stand, even knowing they were enemies. This contradiction haunted her. The bicycle carried her away physically, but not mentally. Each ride distanced her from the scene while memories followed relentlessly. Yet she continued. The occupation allowed no pause. Every successful escape reinforced the tactic. The bicycle worked. It saved her life repeatedly. That effectiveness made stopping difficult. When survival depends on motion, reflection becomes a luxury resistance fighters rarely have. Over time, the Nazis grew suspicious, increased patrols, checkpoints, and informants tightened control. Hanni Schaaf became recognizable because of her red hair. The environment grew more dangerous with each operation, yet the bicycle remained effective because it never changed. It did not evolve technologically. Its power was psychological. Soldiers expected threats to look like soldiers. A girl cycling contradicted that expectation. This asymmetry was resistance engineering at its most efficient. No modification, no blueprint, only exploitation of bias. The bicycle functioned as an invisible weapon because the enemy refused to see it as one. Ultimately, the bicycle symbolized how ordinary objects become deadly under occupation. It was not forged in factories or issued by armies. It was chosen. Freddie's story demonstrates that warfare is not only about weapons, but about who is allowed to move, who is ignored, and who is underestimated. In Nazi-occupied Holland, a bicycle became a killing machine not because it changed, but because the world around it collapsed. The streets remained the same. The riders did not. And for as long as the bicycle carried her unnoticed, Freddie Oversteegen survived to fight another day. War ended violently for Freddie with the execution of Hanni Schaaf in April 1945. Captured at a checkpoint, identified by red hair roots, Hanni was tortured and shot just weeks before liberation. Her death shattered the resistance cell and left psychological wounds deeper than any battlefield injury for everyone involved. After the war, survival did not bring peace. Freddie and Truus carried trauma, insomnia, and guilt into civilian life. Silence became coping. Celebrations triggered memories. Remembrance days reopened wounds. Freddie married, raised children, and tried normality. Yet the war persisted internally, shaping decades marked by untreated post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. Public recognition came painfully late. For years, communist resistance fighters were ignored or distrusted during the Cold War. Only in 2014 did the Dutch government award Freddie and Truus the Mobilization War Cross, calling it historical justice. By then, heroism had long been overshadowed by loss, grief, and quiet survival. The bicycle remains the most haunting symbol of her story. An object of childhood freedom became an instrument of death. It shows how war distorts meaning, forcing ordinary tools into violence. When societies collapse, innocence becomes camouflage, and children are shaped into soldiers long before they understand the weight involved. Freddie later said the killings were a necessary evil in an inhuman war. That sentence captures the moral paradox of resistance. There were no clean choices, only unbearable ones. Her life asks whether survival under occupation demands violence, and what price is paid by those forced to choose it alone. Hanni Schaaf's execution marked the emotional endpoint of the resistance for Freddie. Losing her closest comrade broke something permanent. Even decades later, Freddie brought red roses to Hanni's grave. Unable to accept the timing or cruelty, victory arrived, but it carried no triumph, only absence, memory, and unanswered questions forever. This story does not glorify killing. It exposes what occupation does to humanity. When war turns streets into battlefields, bicycles into weapons, and girls into assassins, something essential is lost. Freddie Oversteegen survived, but the war never ended for her. It followed her for the rest of her life entirely.